All right, thank you all for coming in. Cardoon. Today we'll be doing our edible landscapes class with you today, going over the basis of how to incorporate edible plants into your everyday landscapes. One of the great things, you know, we like to incorporate edibles, especially myself, into our landscapes. Partly for many different reasons. It offers a lot of diversity within your landscapes, a little breakup of the normal landscape plant materials that we do have, and provides you that opportunity to be eating from your landscapes rather than just your gardens or your classical vegetable gardens. One of the great things I like to encourage people to do this method of gardening is to save a lot of space, because you're incorporating your landscape beds into your food production. Not everyone has space for both a landscape bed and a garden. So this is a great way you can help incorporate aesthetics as well as food production within your landscaping areas. Also a really great way to utilize smaller spaces. You know, that's definitely something we get into the issue with in town, especially, is I'd love to do more, but I have so much less space that's taken up by this tree or that shrub or what have you. And some of the things we can do with this type of gardening is incorporate edibles into being this tree or that shrub, so that throughout the year you have different things you're gaining from it rather than just aesthetics. One of the things that comes to mind for me is incorporating different levels of height to use your landscapes to your advantage to create shade and or allow heat in certain areas depending on what you're wanting to grow. So one of the things that I like to address are the more suitable for edible landscaping classes, because it's really easy to just assume you can shift your garden into your landscape areas. While that is somewhat true, it's really hard to go completely edible into your landscapes without diving in head first. The approach I use is a little more balanced and has some aspects of your classical ornamental plants as well as your edibles. One thing that comes to mind first off that I use regularly in my landscapes is the edible or blueberries. This here is the legacy variety. It's one of my favorites. It's an early to mid-season, and then also is a prolific producer. So the amount of berries for your plant is really great. That's something that I like to have, because as I walk through my yard, I like to be able to snack the entire time. So if you place your food items throughout your garden that you can enjoy that, we call it the snack trail, so to speak, in edible landscaping. And it's something that I've incorporated all across my property at home, to the point where I can eat on a given little walk with my dogs around our place. I can have blueberries, marionberries, the right time of season, apples, and marionberries and other odds and ends like that. What I'll touch base with more, like I said, are the things that incorporate well with your other landscape plants. Blueberries is one of those. It provides you blooms throughout the spring, gives you really great harvests, and then in the fall provides an amazing red color as it transitions into losing its leaves for dormancy. And then some people argue one way or the other, but there is this smooth red element to the bark of the blueberry that allows it to have another winter aesthetic appeal to it. So, you know, it does lose its leaves, however, it serves many other purposes within your landscape through the year. And, you know, one thing we like to incorporate with edible landscapes is everything you plant should have multiple purposes, not just one. And that being said, you know, we can incorporate things like chives and onions, not just necessarily for the use of chives and onions, but the blossoms as well, for the use of bringing in pollinators to some of your other crops, such as, you know, wanting blueberries or lingonberries is one of my favorites. Strawberries, they all do that much better with a bigger bee presence. And if you want chives anyway, what a great opportunity to have both incorporated there. Beautiful purple flowers once they're blooming, great in many different dishes and uses. So it's very versatile, has multiple aspects of why you might want to plant it. The same goes for a lot of what else we have here. This one's a lingonberry, sort of a cousin to the evergreen huckleberry. This is one of my favorites, a little more tart than your average huckleberry. stays a little more low growing, but it's a really vibrant red berry. A little bit off the beaten path of your typical berries, but it's an evergreen shrub, so it will stay green all year long, which is hard to find in your fruit-bearing plants in general. The majority of them are deciduous or perennial, they'll die back. And so I push the lingonberries and the evergreen huckleberry, which is this one here, a lot because they stay green all year. And that's something from food crops that we don't actually gain a lot from, is that year-round color. So these are a really great one to offer you that aspect of growing within your landscape to also provide food. But also won't end up with just sticks like the blueberry can be all winter. That being said, I have an affinity for blueberries, so I don't mind it. And you know, typically we'll have deciduous shrubs within our landscapes as well, and those do the same thing every winter as well. So having that tree or shrub that does that provide you food in addition is always a wonderful aspect. And so secondly, I'll kind of incorporate our two larger items. This is where you can help provide shade for some of your other crops. This is an Arbequina olive. It's considered a self-fertile olive and is hardy to 10 degrees here. So it, aside from the extreme anomaly years, can handle our colds. They will self-produce its own olives, not in great quantity until they're much larger, but if anything, it's a really pleasing plant to grow. It's off the beaten path. It's an evergreen also, so it will keep its foliage all year. One of the rarer fruit trees that actually does keep its leaves. Most of them are deciduous, which leads me to my Brooks prune over here. Another fun one to incorporate. It's a beautiful tree when full grown. You get a wonderful harvest. Brooks prunes are one of the most prolific producers in the prune world. You know, not everyone likes prunes. Right now we're running a little low on our fruit tree inventory. We are getting more in, but this one looked good, so I brought it in for our show and tell, so to speak. So these are two types of things that you can incorporate to add some height and some different dimensions to your landscapes that then will help you grow your lingonberry or your huckleberry a little bit better, having some filtered shade, not full direct sunlight. And then we kind of get into a lot more lower lying things that can really fill in your gaps and your bare dirt spaces between your ornamental plants. And the things I like to incorporate the most in there are herbs. So this is the lavender we have here. This is a really, really beautiful one. And then here I have a culinary rosemary. So this is your classical, it's called Chef's Choice. It's very aromatic and will provide a lot of great flavor to any meal that it's used with, in addition to providing great fragrance in your garden. So incorporating both of these offers a lot of fragrance for you. You have flowers, you also have culinary uses as well. So there's 3 different reasons to plant it right there, you know. And then they'll have some dieback, but both of these plants will be evergreen as well, providing you that year-round color. And then we can incorporate things like strawberries to stay low and cover up your bare dirt areas so that less weeds have a chance to come up. If you're intentionally growing low-growing things like strawberry, it's that much more competition for the weeds, and they struggle when they're in competition. When they don't have competition, weeds thrive. So if you've given them an area to grow through that's more difficult than just bare dirt, and you're also benefiting bringing pollinators in and hopefully getting quite a few strawberries too, you've added several elements to your landscape that benefit you in many different ways. And one other thing I like to incorporate in here, and you'll see I have a couple photos of artichokes and cardoons. Artichokes are a very widely edible version of the cardoon. They have a softer edge to their leaf and their flower set. The flower is typically what people eat. The catch to a cardoon is all those soft rounded tips are extremely sharp points on the cardoon. And it's more prized for the stem below the flower, and peel it like a carrot, and then steam it like broccoli or Brussels sprouts. But the benefit to the cardoon is that it has the flower set on it is huge. It grows this monstrous blue, purple flower head that comes out just like an artichoke, but again with those points to it. And you can get flower heads that are this big, and at any given time during the year there will be multiple pollinators within there enjoying their life to the full extent. And that's the beauty that I get out of it. I don't actually eat the cardoons I grow. They're simply to bring in more pollinators, and the flower itself is gorgeous as well. So like I said, the edible landscape aspect can incorporate many different plants, but they don't all have to be directly for eating. You know, there's many aspects to incorporate in that. Beauty, smell. For me, it's the attraction of wildlife for my other plants. The more I grow cardoons, the more pollinators I have for my blueberries and my lingonberries, which don't bring them in on their own as well as this does, because the flower on it is so showy that the pollinators are attracted to that area and will then ideally pollinate your other desirables you have growing. Another thing to incorporate in your lower lying areas are things like sage and thyme. They do really well through the heat of the summer in some shade. So incorporating them into the shade of, say, your olive tree or even some of your blueberry bushes as they get larger is a great way to extend your edible sage season before they bolt into flowering. And then you got to wait till next year. They're not as bitter. So being able to incorporate your taller plants that you have, not just edibles, if you've got a 4-foot tall rhododendron, for example, planting those shade-loving things next to it or in the understory, if you're able to, can really help you utilize that square footage of a small space. In addition to the classic thing I hear lately is I only have irrigation in my landscape beds. So how do I get water to my vegetables and my other crops? Well, plant them in your landscape beds, and then you can have that irrigation working for you, really providing you the water needed for some of these. You know, need a little bit more water than your average landscape plant, but if you have the irrigation there, you can control that a little bit better than having to create a whole new system for a simple, just vegetable type of garden. And then one other one that comes to mind here that's really easily incorporated and it's sort of a mid-level height plant is currant. This is our consort black currant. It's a really great one, makes wonderful jams and jellies. By the time it's about 4.5, 5 feet tall, it's a very prolific producer, to the point where you can make pints and pints of jam every year, or simply fresh eating. I personally like to make currants and those type of things into preserves, because once you get established, your harvest can be so abundant that fresh eating is a little bit hard to keep up with. And if you don't have the freezer space, you know, preserving is another wonderful, great way to do it. And so another one that I like to incorporate in here, and this one sort of ties back to your vegetable garden, is this is a bay laurel. So those of you who like to make tomato sauces or any of those type of things, it's really great to be able to grow those few bay leaves that you use on your own. These are a small, compact version, since most of the time doing those things you're not using a lot. It's a really reasonable thing to grow on your own. Not that they're expensive in the store necessarily, but just that much more homegrown aspects to some of those things you might be doing every year anyway. And so that's another aspect of you know, incorporating one more element. And again, this is another evergreen. So it's considered an herb in the sense of how we use it culinarily. But it's an evergreen tree that, you know, will give you that color in addition to the lingonberry and the olive. Incorporating those in different levels and heights around your house can provide you that contrast through the winter that's not so monotone to the classic doldrums we get here in December, January.
With the bay laurel, I have 2 laurel trees in my yard. I think they were just volunteers. Are they? I mean, I use the laurel leaves to cook with. It's okay?
It should be, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If you have and you're here, I'd say that's a testament. No.
I mean, I was just wondering, I mean, are you supposed to specifically use that kind of laurel?
No, this one's actually a specific variety called Little Ragu. And it's specifically bred for the idea that you're going to use it in tomato sauces. However, all bay laurels, a true bay laurel, which even if it's a volunteer, are edible from the leaf standpoint. However, I've not actually known people to eat the leaf rather than use them for the cooking.
I only smell them. I've never.
Yeah. And so even in the sauce, cooked through, open it years later, that's usually discarded and used for its flavor elements more than anything. And yeah, you should be okay, especially if you've already used them. That's an indicator. Yeah. Are there any other questions? I'll kind of open it up, conversations and questions. And
yeah, I'd like to know, like, say the books. Do they come in organic or they're always?
So from a fruit tree, we can't. On the fruit tree and the berry side of things, we don't bring in intentionally grown organic because from a propagation side of things, it's virtually impossible. The idea is that on organic farms, for example, they'll buy in that stock and grow it organically from that point forward. And there are, say, for example, there is one bare root organic fruit tree seller that I know of, but their prices are astronomical, and so we don't even bother because all you're buying is his certification. You're not actually buying a better tree by any means, and he's trying to recoup the cost of getting certified by doing that. So on that level of things, we try and just encourage people to grow organically from here if that is something you're really after, because it's so incredibly hard to source organically. If we could, we would have all organic blueberries available. But the simple truth of propagation in the nursery world is you need to have some of those conventional methods in order to get us to a selling point with a lot of these shrubs. However, that being said, I've bought virtually every edible that we have, organic or not, and I just simply grow them organically. Yeah.
So, speaking of wildlife, with Cardoon and artichokes and blueberries, how do deer do it with these?
So blueberries, deer will go after like nobody's business. So if you don't have a like fenced yard per se, blueberries, and you have deer present, blueberries could end up being an attractant that destroy other things. That being said, I have never seen them do anything to artichokes or cardoons. Also being said though, deer will try anything once. So if they're curious, and the younger deer more than anything, they will try anything. And then move on if it's bitter or not their liking. Yeah, very much so. It's especially the cardoon, and I don't want to say it's a great plant to crop to deter them, but at the same time, the defense mechanism of the plant being so pokey, it's got filamentous fibers coming off of the stems as well. Part of the reason it's needed to peel and steam in order to eat is that releases the bitterness and becomes a little sweeter.
And soak in lemon juice.
Yeah, that's another great way. I'll sweeten it up really well. You had a question here for me? Sorry.
How big does a bay laurel get?
This one is it's more like a shrub tree, 3 to 4 feet on average at a few years' time. This one's suited really well for container growing on patios. So if another one, if you have minimal space, this could be a really great option. Oh, this one? Yeah, this is a lavender. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't get everyone a sheet here.
That's a lavender?
The purple flower is lavender, yes. The specific variety, I just grabbed one. This is Regal Splendid. So this is a really showy one. I want to say we only have a few of them available right now. I'm trying to bring them in constantly.
And it's considered an herb, right?
Yes, yes.
That one?
Yep.
From the right family.
With the olive tree, they're just so gorgeous. How fast does that grow?
So you'll get between a foot to 18 inches in a full year of really good health and growing conditions. You get some peaks of heat and valleys of low temps, it might kind of even keel a little more.
But it probably takes sun and heat pretty well.
Yeah, sun and heat it takes extremely well. It's the colds where it can get a little dicier. But again, they have been bred to be a lot more hardy now. I've had one now for 3 years and gone through the last 3 years of insane weather in my entire life. I feel like it's been more crazy in the last couple. And so from that sense, I can personally tell you that I've gone through those events and they've done really well. In full sun, with enough water, they'll grow a little bit faster. But again, it's a very manageable rate. It's not anything too out of control where you go, oh my gosh, now it doesn't fit.
And deer won't, they won't.
I haven't heard anything about it, but again, I always check back to they'll try it before they move on. If you're worried about it, this is a small enough tree you can cage early on into about head height. And then from head height above, deer tend to leave alone because it's too much work for them to get out there. Yeah. Do you have any questions?
I do. I've never tasted Cardoon, and I'm wondering if it tastes like artichoke.
It does.
It does.
I've cooked with it.
I think it
It
tastes
has
like
that
an
same
artichoke
flavor.
asparagus combo.
Well, you
is what
said
it
something
can
about
flavor,
Brussels
yeah.
sprouts, and I said no.
I just meant in the cooking manner of steaming them and so on.
But the flavor is like artichoke.
Yes,
It tastes like a very mild artichoke. But you do have to soak it as you do it. It's so Italian.
Yeah.
I mean, when
It's
you have
not
to,
the part of the plant you think you'd eat either. Yeah, so that's
you
what's
have
kind
to
of
peel it
interesting.
and then you have to cook it for a while.
What do you eat? What part of it?
So you
The
take
stalk.
like your flower head is up here, and you take the stalk about a foot down, and that stalk you peel it, steam it, soak it, and then kind of dice up, chop. You know, there's lots of different dishes you can put it in. But the average cooking method is typically the same to get them to a flavor that's favorable.
And it's
not
good
as
and
bitter.
It's a beautiful plant.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is it just gets bigger and better every year. You know, I'll have a spread on my Cardoons that's out this wide every way, and I've had them well over 8 feet tall blossoming. And you know, it sounds overwhelming at first, but it's a sight to see. It's pretty cool.
Oh, the blossoms.
And they're so big, yeah. And like I said, I don't actually eat that. I have, but I don't grow it for that purpose. I grow it because it's got these wonderful flowers.
That's why I don't eat mine. Flowers. So
Yeah,
good.
well, and it flowers really, it goes from an edible point to the flower all the way open like that.
Yeah.
And actually artichokes will do the same. So it's you got to get on it when it looks edible. Get it. Because as I always say, when I think my blueberries are ready, I say I can wait till the morning, and then the birds get the memo and they go in and get it. And so if it looks edible and harvestable, do it, or the nature will get you. Sorry, she had a quick, just waiting for a moment.
What's the variety on the olive?
On the olive, this is an Ardequina. It's one of the few varieties that's self-fertile. They all will do a little better if you have more, but I brought this one up just because I'm typically talking about finer, smaller spaces with folks like doing edible landscaping, so I try to incorporate things that don't need that partner to produce. Yeah.
So you're saying the olives are edible?
Yes, they are.
Okay.
Yes.
So
You do have to
you
pick
ever
them
had
still.
one off of an olive tree?
I have. Yeah.
You thought they weren't edible?
You have to process it.
They're not.
You can't eat it right away.
You,
Right.
yeah, you gotta cook them somehow, or process them, or pickle them. But I've actually never eaten a raw
I
olive.
I tried one. My sister had olive.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
thought, wow, maybe I'd like one of those.
Yeah. No, it's more of a. I don't want to say a novelty as much as a off the beaten path, if you will, an opportunity for some diversity within a landscape, and then because they are edible, I know so many people who are obsessed with pickling, and so olives are a really great thing to do that with, and that's one of the processing processes that really sweetens them up, not to be
My
as
lawnmower
bitter.
didn't like them either when they dropped.
Yeah, I'll bet.
So,
Shoot out every direction, yeah.
Now the blueberry, you say those don't come organic, like.
Correct, like we're not able to get blueberries organic, yeah.
What is the compact one that would be prolific?
Well, there's a bushel and berry series that several of our growers have bought into, and you'll see them as we go over here. One of them is a bountiful blue, and it's a compact blueberry bush designed to grow in a container on a patio. Doesn't have to grow in a container, but it will stay small. So it won't, like this Legacy, for example, if you let it get big, it'll get up to 6 feet tall and wide. But we'll also have berries throughout all of that. So that's what I love to see. But for the smaller spaces, we have several varieties like that Bountiful Blue that are more compact. That one comes to mind as the most common of the compact versions of blueberries. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions, folks? Yeah.
How about water? How much water do you typically?
So on average, I picked everything in here that needs water every couple days in the heat of the summer. Now that being said, in the spring, that's based on the weather almost entirely. The summer is so much more predictable for us in Oregon. From mid-June through August, we don't get much in the way of rain at all. But up until June 15th or so, we've got varying weather that you'll have to gauge that on. But in the spring and fall, these are the type of crops that can go a week in between watering. But as you get into the June time frame is when every other day is really necessary. But again, if you're incorporating your taller items to help create shade, then some of your smaller items don't need it as often. That shade will really help create microclimates and reduce water needs for some of those areas. Questions? No, they're a little bit tart off the bush. They're usually sweeter once you've made like a preserve, something where you get to add sugars to them. Huckleberries are sweet off the vine, however, they go from a really dark purple black to a true black. And that dark purple, almost black, can be a little tart if picked early. But if it's gone all the way to a jet black, then it should be sweet. Yeah.
Why does that say salvia?
Because that's the botanical name for sage.
But not like the regular.
Those are like herb, they're not considered an herb, but they are part of the same plant family. Yeah. That's okay.
You're recording.
It's turned off.
Oh, it is.
got a
It's
great-
fine.
It's turned off.
Yeah.
They got a great angle
Yeah,
on your
no
backside.
worries. Yeah,
I'm trying to advertise.
yeah. Any other questions, folks?
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.